Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me very well. I've seen people have joined in from all over the world. I can see people from Europe, from Africa, so the time zone is a bit different, but I hope you all can hear me. Thank you for joining us. We just want to have a discussion on public infrastructure projects, the not so obvious failure factors. Now, this has been organized by PM4NGO, which you can check them out later if you don't know about PM4NGO, and also with Ware Capacity, which the company I work for. And this is strictly about discussing our experience on delivering projects and also looking at the failure factors for projects. But we're going to focus on the not so obvious ones, which we may not have an overview about, and we want to start discussing them and see how we can mitigate these factors. So thank you very much for joining us. In the next 30 minutes, 40 minutes, I'll take you through some of the points we have. You also have an opportunity to post your questions. I'll take out about another 15 to 20 minutes to respond to questions. Also, we'll try and make it engaging and see how we can take this forward even after this first presentation. I'm going to share the slides now. And so from this point, you're going to see my presentation. And I'll run through the slides, then I come back to question and answer sessions. Okay, now public infrastructure projects, not so obvious failure factors. This is strictly about public infrastructure projects, which means they are projects that are built by government for public use. My name is Ian Soikanem, and I work for Ware Capacity Consulting. So yes, the title is quite interesting. It's something we need to look at. It might not be in any literature, so it's something I think we need to keep discussing. First, we'll be looking at background and objectives of the presentation and what we want to achieve after this presentation. We'll start looking at some definitions, and then we'll take it from there. And more importantly, looking at mitigation measures. How do we mitigate these not so obvious failure factors as project managers? Introduction. Now, this is a knowledge sharing discussion based on personal and organizational experience, and therefore it's not documented anywhere. It's strictly based on our experience and experience delivering public infrastructure projects, and also working with government and politicians, and also applying project management principles we believe should be able to help deliver successful projects, and more importantly, failing at some of them. Now, the concept of failure sometimes comes as though the project manager has failed if the projects don't deliver intended outcomes. However, from this presentation, we'll see the levels of failure, because if you're supposed to deliver an asset and you deliver that asset, but if it's not in use, then there's another level of responsibility to ensure that the assets that were procured are put in use, and also they have positive impact on society. So now, after this session, we should be able to dissect failure in terms of, did we have control to make it successful, but also appreciating failure as something that can be a stepping stone to help us improve and do better. The objective is to encourage project managers to look beyond the immediate project environment. Sometimes we spend time looking at delivering that asset, looking at public infrastructure assets. We focus on either delivering a school or a road, but not looking at the external environment. The user, will the road be used? Will it achieve the impact intended by the development planners? And also looking at how project managers can appreciate the influence they have in terms of delivering project outcomes. We expect engagement on the not so obvious project failure factors. And that really means we want to discuss this and take it further. We're looking at an opportunity where we can do more of this over a period of time to share knowledge and also learn from each other, basically based on our experiences. And also appreciate failure a bit differently, because sometimes I've seen where project managers complain about delivering a project, but it's not in use. We can appreciate that, yes, we've done our bit. However, we can do things differently to ensure projects deliver the outcomes they are intended. After the session, we hope that we can discuss a bit further and maybe possibly have another session in the future. Okay, some definitions now. Public infrastructure. These are facilities, structures, equipment, services, and institutions that are essential to the economy and, more importantly, quality of life of the nation. Quality of life is very important when we talk about public infrastructure, because if it's not improving the quality of life of the citizenry, then you've not achieved the objective of putting the infrastructure in the first place. If it's not improving the economy, because infrastructure is expected to drive and improve and support economic activities. And if they don't do that, then they're not achieving the objective. And so key to us is quality of life. Has the asset improved quality of life? And so it's easy to build a school or a road or a rail system, but if that rail is not translating to economic improvement, but not just in terms of the numbers in economy, but also the quality of life of the people, then it's not achieved the objective. Another definition I want to share is project. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. And this is from the PMD Pro Guide. We've highlighted results because, yes, you can deliver a result for building an asset. However, have you delivered the development outcomes for that asset? Now, another definition is project management, which is a discipline of planning, organizing, and managing resources to bring about successful delivery of specific project goals, outcomes, and outputs. Now, we've highlighted outcomes because we want to discuss that a bit differently. Are project managers responsible for project outcomes? Now, this is a question we've asked, here and there to be sure that, look, we are really focusing on what is feasible for project managers. And so if a project manager is responsible for delivering a road, can that same manager have that responsibility of ensuring the road achieves the expected outcome? Expected outcome being improving economy and also quality of life of the people. Down later on in the presentation, you're going to see where some assets have been built, but they are not delivering development outcomes. And so the question we want to start with, which we'll answer later on, I think we'll have to discuss it. Are project managers responsible for project outcomes? So that's one question, and I look forward to discussing that with you. But let's just continue. The next slide is about output versus outcome. We still talk about what is project output and project outcomes. Project outputs are expected to deliver intended project outcomes. However, that's not automatic. You can build an asset and it will not deliver the immediate intended outcomes. So we'll give a clear example. Hospital versus healthcare. I'm going to show you some examples where you have a beautifully designed and built hospital that is not delivering healthcare because the demand is not there, or people cannot afford it, or the prevalent health situation does not demand that kind of a hospital or the design. And so is it possible to have a hospital that is not delivering healthcare? Yes. And we will look at that down the presentation, but clearly defining the difference between output, which is within the scope and responsibility of a project manager to deliver an output, which is a hospital. Then also the project outcomes, which is healthcare, which is slightly beyond the responsibility of a project manager. Now, infrastructure projects that fail to deliver intended project outcomes are failed projects. Now, this is a quote from us. I mean, we are quoting that, and it's another area I would like us to discuss later on in the presentation. Because we believe if you build an asset, even though your responsibility is limited to delivering that asset, you still have some a role to play to ensure that that asset delivers intended outcomes, even though you're not responsible. But that asset not delivering outcomes is a failed project. And so how do we ensure that projects we get involved in as project managers can deliver project outcomes just beyond project outputs? Now, let's share some experiences that will bring home the idea we're looking at. So this is a hospital. What we've done carefully to ensure we don't put the names of these assets, but these are real assets, they exist. I've visited in almost all of them that I'm going to present. And we want to ensure we don't put the names so that it doesn't bring further discussions about it. However, these are assets we've actually visited, except just one of them that was on the news recently. So if you looked at the news, you would have seen it, one of them that I'll present later. So the first one is a hospital, a 300-bed hospital. It was commissioned in 2015, very well designed and very well equipped. However, we're here last year, 2018, after commissioning, it's still not in use. Why? We asked a few questions. The first operator, the cost of getting access to service was almost not affordable for the people in that city. So nobody goes to that hospital. They prefer going to a pharmacy across the road or a small clinic that will just charge you a small fee. And so the hospital is lying there, beautifully designed, well equipped, billions of investment in terms of financial investment going into that project, but it's just lying there, not in use. So 4 years down the line, the doors are still locked because nobody's going there. So that's just one example of where an asset has been delivered. So the project output is there. However, the intended outcome of that project is not achieved. So as far as 2019 is concerned, the project is not a success. Another one is a water project. I was there in 2006. And we took a walk around the facility. Everything built, everything in place. However, there was no clear plan on running the facility in terms of power. Now, they had a power plant, but the utility operator told us they cannot afford the running cost of the plant because what they get in terms of revenue cannot even run the plant in terms of power generation. So the utility was just lying there, the asset was lying there for 4 years when we visited and not in operation, and less than 10% of what is required to run it was less than 10% is what is needed to invest in power to run that asset in terms of the cost of building the asset. So a large sum was invested to build the entire asset with an intended outcome of providing water services to the public. However, a small part of the asset operations is impacted by poorly looking at outcomes, and the asset is not operational. And so that was a huge disappointment because for us, people were still going to streams and rivers to fetch water, whereas there's a very huge asset lying there, and the biggest problem was just fixing the power. So that's a clear case again of asset delivered, but not operational because of something beyond the immediate project output of delivering a water utility plant. Police audit. This was in the news. This is the one I talked about that was in the news just this week. It was completed and commissioned in 2014. However, it's not in use. It's lying there. Just the gates are locked, and it's not providing the intended outcomes. Now, I'm sure this was built to improve security in the area. However, 5 years down the line, it's still not in use. I'm sure it's well equipped. Investment has gone into building the asset itself, but you don't see any police and you don't see anybody going there to make complaints and reporting cases. So another case of building an asset. So the project manager for developing this police office delivered on the output. However, is it providing security as which should be the development outcome for that project? Now, this is a road we went on a couple of years ago. That's like 2 years ago. And we asked a question about how come we are driving on this road for 30 minutes and there's no other vehicle on the road? And we found out the road was commissioned in 2009 and absolutely road to nowhere, honestly, because we drove on that road for about 30 minutes. No other car was on the road for 30 minutes. The next car we saw was after 30 minutes of driving. And so we asked the question, why did you build the road? What was the intention of building the road? This is a very, it's about a 50-kilometer road. It stretches a very long distance. And the only thing we saw was people with bicycles coming from their farms. And they didn't need this road. They needed like a rural road, maybe 2 lanes or even a single lane. But it's just lying there and a lot invested in it. And someone said, okay, maybe in the future it will be used. But in the future, things may be different. So why do you invest so much now without a clear outcome of what that road will provide? What would be the development outcome for building that road? So this is another example of building the asset. So the project manager delivered a good project, a beautiful road. However, did we really need the road? How do we ensure that these things actually add up to development? Okay. It's an airport. We're involved in it actually, and we actually pushed for, we discouraged the development of this airport at some point. And yes, the airport was built at some point and it was commissioned in 2014. But I tell you today, the airport is not in use. A lot invested to build the terminals, the runway, the tracking systems, everything installed, but there was no demand for air services. There was no, the airlines just couldn't go there because who is flying? So we kind of discouraged to say, look, there's a better way to invest this money you have for development. But it was built, and as of today, it's not delivering any development outcome, and investment done already. So yes, the project manager delivered an airport, beautifully designed and built, but it's not delivering development outcomes. So how do we ensure that the project we go into, beyond delivering the outputs, can deliver development outcomes? Okay, now looking at outcomes versus outputs, can project managers influence project outcomes? Now, this question is slightly different from project managers being responsible for project outcomes. Now, responsibility means you can be held accountable. However, when you have an influence, it means even though you're responsible for the output, you can influence to be sure that the outcomes are achieved. So for instance, if you're given a brief to deliver an asset, you ask a few questions about what the intended outcomes for that asset, what are the intended outcomes for that asset. That way you can start beyond delivering your immediate project output. you can start looking at how best that asset will impact on the society positively. That means delivering development outcomes. So the question here is, can project managers influence project outcomes? And so that takes us to the next slide, where we start looking at dimensions of influence. Because yes, we are saying yes, project managers can influence outcomes at some level. So let's look at these levels of influence. For some of those that have attended some of our training sessions, you must have seen this. Basically looking at the dimensions of influence in terms of infrastructure. So first is the individual level. Now, so as a project manager at the individual level, you have the capacity to influence project outcomes, saying, look, we have been given a brief to deliver an asset. However, who is responsible to ensure that the asset we deliver can go further to deliver development outcomes? So at the individual level, as a project manager, that's how you can influence infrastructure projects. So it's easy, which is within your responsibility. It's easy to just deliver the asset. However, it will be better if you can see the asset you've delivered going further to deliver development outcomes. And so, yes, that's one level of, one dimension of influence as an individual. Now, as an organization, I'm sure most project managers work within an organization. And so there's a level of organizational influence you can have, meaning you have more people looking at the same objective being, how can we deliver on project outcomes? So beyond just the project manager himself saying, for this asset we're going to deliver, we need to make sure we try to influence a positive development outcomes using that project. Now we go to organizational level, where you have more people in the organization that can use their spheres of influence to try and see how going beyond the outputs, you can get to outcomes. So yes, organizational level, maybe as a construction company or as a consulting firm, working with other colleagues within an organization or associates, you can have influence on development outcomes, particularly looking at infrastructure projects. Now, on the other side, where we, from our experience, are clear that project managers may not really have a high level of influence, is the community level. So community level, people have asked, what do you mean by community? We can share some experiences. We just, a project has just been stalled. This was just a couple of months ago, where we went to a community, a renewable energy project, where a company says, look, we want to help with improving power supply in your community. And we were involved in developing that project. However, the community came out and said, look, we want you to employ our youths. We said, that's fine. We can work with your people, engage the community youths, work with the elders. So that was done with the community engagement. But further down the line, some other community people came out and said, look, we want to be the ones to deliver this project. Unfortunately for us, we couldn't decide that as project managers. We just couldn't decide who delivers the project. The person procuring, got us on the project. However, the community would not have the capacity to deliver that asset, and so that project stalled. Now, the learning from there is that, look, even though we did all the community engagement, talked to the elders, the leadership, the youth, the community as a whole has an influence on delivering infrastructure, because as a community, they sat down and decided, look, you need to pay us a certain amount of money before you can deliver this asset. And that's a clear, power the community has. So beyond being an individual as a project manager, There's another level that you don't have control over, a community. And community could just mean just where you live, your city, your county, just where you live with other people. And communities have decided, look, we don't want this asset except you do A, B, and C. In some cases, the requests are, valid, because, for instance, we've seen where you try to build a toll road and they say, look, the toll road is too expensive, so we will not pay for this road, so we don't need the toll gates. We did not, consider the cost. However, in some cases where you're either building a school or a hospital with the intention of development outcomes, and the community as a whole comes together and say, look, you need to pay, a certain amount of money before you come to this community to build this asset, then that's another way of influencing infrastructure negatively, because you've kind of stalled the project. So we've seen a number of projects like that stalled, from our experiences, and that's another level of dimension of influence. Now, the biggest one we know is the government. Now, government basically is where you have the decision makers, because decision makers are the ones that have responsibility in terms of delivering public infrastructure. And so with the government, there's a larger sphere of influence. You can influence policy, you can influence the thinking of the people, the orientation, but also influence trust. That means if you're in government, you need to build trust with the people. So there are several dimensions of influence. However, as project managers, the individual level and the organizational level are the ones we think project managers can actually exercise their levels of influence or their strengths to influence this project. But on the community level and government level, except as a project manager, you're on that side of the divide. Then you can do that as an individual trying to influence from government. But as an individual project manager or as an organization engaged to deliver a project, you have certain levels of influence by trying to look at who is responsible and ensuring that those responsible and they can see the outcomes and ensure development outcomes are achieved. Now, failure factors. Now, this has been this is established. So there's been a number of research in terms of project management and project failure. And so from the PMD Pro Guide, there's some failure factors listed there. I've just listed some of them here, just for us to appreciate the failure factors that have been established. However, we are more looking at the not so obvious failure factors. So the first one is political. I'm not sure this is written in any document, so if there's anyone out there, we'll be happy to look at it. But we believe that political factor is a major one, is number one. And we call it PPP. It's not public-private partnership, it's politics policy project. In that order. Now, what that means is politics determine policies and policies determine projects. Most times we think politicians just take decisions, do their campaigns, do their manifestos, and just take decisions. We as technocrats, we just deliver the project, but there's a direct relationship between the decision of a politician and the policies they roll out and the projects we deliver, and more importantly, the outcomes of those projects. So for instance, on this, looking at the dimensions of influence, government has the biggest influence. And so it's very important to ensure that politicians can appreciate their powers in terms of determining development outcomes. And so as project managers, we can just remain at the project level, say, look, we just deliver project. But we need to start looking at how do you influence policies, policies that are proposed by politicians, but beyond just influencing policies, how do you influence politics? Because if you're not part of designing a development plan or designing a manifesto that will deliver, development outcomes, then at the project level, you're already limited to what you deliver. So you're limited to delivering the assets, but you might not be able to deliver the development outcome if you don't influence the policy or the politics. So yes, number one for us in terms of the not so obvious failure factors is the politics, the political aspect of things. And we believe that infrastructure projects are very political, very, very political. It doesn't matter where in the world, whether it's in Europe, America, or Africa, infrastructure projects are very political. And we can see that in some of the projects in the UK, whether it's the runway, or projects in America, whether it's the roads or rail or the pipelines, they are all very political. How you influence policies from the politics before you get to delivering the asset is very, very important. So number one, political factors as not so obvious failure factors. According to Statista, we have 24% of major infrastructure projects in 2018 that failed due to government inability to select the right projects. Now, government is saying, look, I want to select projects based on my manifesto or based on the political interest I have, and they just go ahead and select this project. However, just as we presented earlier, it's clear that one of the projects could be an airport, but the airport might never be used. So you've invested billions in resources, but you're not getting the development outcome. So it's very clear from these statistics that yes, it's possible to have government not select the right project to achieve development outcomes. The failure factor number two is development planning. Now, that is linked to looking at a long-term, bigger picture development and delivery of infrastructure, meaning planning with consideration to the user and the economy. Goes back to our definition of public infrastructure, because it's supposed to deliver quality of life to the citizens and also improve the economy. And according to Statista, again, 25% of major projects in 2018 failed due to public opposition. So we give the example of people not happy with the projects. There's something not right with the development planning aspect of things, but also looking at the linkage between infrastructure projects. So you need to link an airport to a road or a rail to improve transportation. You need to link a hospital to supplies. That way people get the drugs they need. You need to link a water supply system to where the demand is high, not where you need to invest so much and not getting the right value. You need to ensure that you have all the inputs required to run an operation. So for instance, power, which is sometimes ignored when you're building an asset because there's an assumption there's public power supply, but after building the asset, there's no public power coming. What do? And so we've seen assets lying waste because these things were not considered as integrated approach to development. So yes, number two, development planning, which is not directly in a project delivery environment. So if you have a project to deliver, most times you don't look at the larger picture of development planning, you're looking at delivering that asset. However, it's important to look at the larger picture of development planning. The third failure factor, not so obvious one, is procurement. It's something that has been documented. However, it's not been seen as a major factor for project failure, because most times we're looking at output-based procurement. Procurement of an asset, meaning we want to build a road, and for you, procurement is let's procure a construction company or an engineering consultancy to deliver the road. And so you deliver a road. However, is the road in use? It means the procurement was output-based instead of outcome-based. So with output-based procurement, yes, you can deliver very good assets, but with outcome-based procurement, you need to deliver development outcomes. It means the road will deliver better quality of life and also improvement in the economy. And so it's very important to look at procurement decisions differently, meaning while you're taking a decision to procure, it should be based on outcomes, development outcomes focused, not just the output of the asset. So those are the three main ones we identified. We can discuss them further. Let me just run through so we have a bit of time to discuss. Mitigation measures. These are measures we think can mitigate some of the not so obvious failure factors. And we've used the word mitigation due to the level of control, because we understand that there's this control within the space of project management and the project managers. And also there are some that are beyond the control of project managers. So yeah, they're just mitigation measures for project managers to look at. So first is mapping and identifying the actors and the influence they have. So who has a role, who has a responsibility? So for instance, let's go back to like building a school. Who has a role in that entire school output project? How do you deliver a school? But how do you deliver education? It's a different ball game. So who is responsible to ensure that you have good teachers that will be in the schools? So not just a project manager delivering a school asset, a beautiful school. You need to look at the entire education sector itself. Who is going to bring the good teachers? Who will deliver the curriculum? Who is going to deliver the learning materials? So yes, you can deliver your beautiful school and it's done, but who delivers the learning materials, who delivers the good teachers, that will probably lead to development outcomes. That means improvement in education. Then that's what you need to do in terms of mapping and identifying the actors that have influence on that project, delivering the expected development outcomes. Also recognizing your level of influence and looking at whether it's an individual level in the project team, or going back to an organization or your associates to look at who can help with that influence. The second mitigation measure we're looking at is linking project outputs to development outcomes. So when you're doing development planning, you need to link those outputs to outcomes. So for instance, you want to build new rail systems. Why do you want to build a very massive terminal when you don't need it? It will help you more to build more stops where the demand is high. And so we've seen rail systems that run through rural areas that have agricultural products to evacuate. But you're just running a rail system to transport commuters. I mean, that's not adding value to the farmer that is along the railroads. So why don't you have a structure that looks at development outcomes that includes agricultural produce leaving the farms to where the needs are? And so you're looking at not just output of building the rail to move commuters, but also moving goods from place of production to the place they are needed. The third one is linking investment decision and procurement decision to development outcomes. So investment decision is about, look, we're ready to spend some money to deliver infrastructure projects. However, procurement decision is looking at how best you want to procure this asset. And so making sure that the investment decision and procurement decision are tied to development outcomes. So the investment you want to make is not tied to just building a hospital, but it's an investment to improve healthcare. And investment to build a school is not just to build a school, but also to improve education. And also when you're procuring, how best do you procure to build a school and also achieve education outcomes, improvement in education. So linking investment decision and procurement decision to development outcomes is one mitigation measure. Outcome focused scenario planning. So a few times we've had scenario planning in terms of delivering infrastructure projects, but the scenario planning most times focus on delivering the asset. Now, beyond delivering the output, that's the asset itself, scenario planning should go beyond towards outcome focused. Meaning, if we are supposed to build a hospital, how do we ensure that that hospital is going to provide the services that is needed within the area? So scenario planning, yes, focus on delivering the asset, but also ensuring that the asset can provide the services that is designed to provide. And the fifth one, which is the last one, is aligning development interest what we call technical solutions to political interest, what we call political solutions. When you're building your technical solutions, basically your development outcomes, you need to ensure that the politicians, which is our PPP, the first P is politics, can understand that development solution, but also can see their political interest, achieved delivering that development solution. That basically takes us to the next step, which describes aligning its interest. So on the left side, you have development interest. On the lower side, you have a political interest. Now, what you want to do in aligning interest is achieving the top right box, desired by both. Meaning, yes, you have achieved development interest, but also ensure that before you even propose a development outcome, you have a clearly defined political outcome as well. That way, decision makers, basically politicians, can see and appreciate themselves and their own interest in that proposal that is coming to deliver development outcomes. So yes, you want to deliver development outcomes, improve quality of life, ensure that the economy is supporting citizens. You must also look at what politicians are thinking, because honestly, from my experience, it's very clear that political thinking sometimes are not very aligned with development thinking. And that's where project managers can do things differently to ensure that you align these two thinking, development outcomes and political solutions. I hope that was useful, and I'm excited. I'm looking forward to receiving questions and interacting with you and your thoughts about what has been presented. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Nyananso, for this amazing presentation. It was rich of very good examples and for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much. I hope that was useful. We can do this again sometime. Maybe we'll have a second version of it. But this was good for us as well to share our experience and our knowledge in delivering assets. And we look forward to engaging with you in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thank you all for taking the time to follow the We Are Capacity presentation in this amazing webinar. Thank you all. Have a great day or great evening. And see you guys on the next webinar.